In many ways, Rakugo is ancient Japan's answer to stand-up comedy. Katsura Sunshine, he performed at Japan Day in Central Park last Sunday, and he also performed at the Japan Society last night. It is all going to be part of the new NHK World Series Dive into Ukiyo-e, if I pronounce that right. It starts next month on NHK World, and it runs through October, and Sunshine is kind enough to join us now. I'm sorry if I butchered some of the pronunciations. I did my best.
That was perfect.
Well, first of all, give a little explanation as to what this art form is, because as I mentioned before, in many ways, especially for the Edo period, this was kind of stand-up comedy, right?
Yes, yeah, you could call it sit-down comedy. It's a 400-year-old tradition of Japanese comic storytelling, and it consists of a lone performer who wears a kimono, kneels on a cushion, and uses only the fan and the hand towel for props, and recites a story. And it's very character-based, the story. There's when you think of storytelling, you think of Once Upon a Time There Was, and the narrator's main. But
right.
What's interesting about Rakugo, it's all conversation. There's almost no narration. A lot of them start with someone knocking at the door, for instance, like, hello, konnichiwa, anybody home? Oh, I was wondering who it was. It's you, come on over, come on over. I was talking to your mother, and she's very, very upset. Why is my mother upset? Because you don't want to work. You don't want to keep a job. Don't you think it's time you started working for a living? I'd love to work if I could find a job that was good for me. And you figure out the situation from the conversation.
How'd you get into this? I mean, you're, as I understand it, the only one in the world right now, Westerner, who's doing this art form, and I think the second one ever. I know you had to go through a 3-year apprentice and everything else. How'd you get into this?
Yeah, it was, first of all, the fact that I stumbled upon it was remarkable. I'd lived in Japan for about 5 years.
You're Canadian by birth, right? Yeah.
I come from Toronto, and I was writing musical theater. I was writing musicals in Toronto, and I was interested in ancient Greek stuff and comedy. I was living in Japan for 5 years and teaching at university, and a gentleman who owned a restaurant, little tiny kind of pub, does these Rakugo shows once every 2 months, and he said, well, if you're interested in culture, you should just come and see this. And so on a whim, I just went. And the guy came out in his kimono, and he was just breaking the audience apart with laughter, telling 400-year-old stories. I couldn't believe what I'd found, this gem of culture that isn't known outside of Japan, or is barely known, at least, yeah.
And you've been around the world. I realized last year you were in Africa. I mean, talk about, you got the Asian culture, a guy originally from North America in Africa, but somehow it translates, right?
Yeah, and the amazing thing about Rakugo comedy is it does translate. And there's no need to adapt for the audience in different countries or anything like that. They're old stories that anyone can understand. And the audiences are from, 8 to 88 as far as age goes. And this is in Japan. And you go, I've gone to, no matter what country I've gone to, people have laughed, people have enjoyed it, and people have become more interested in Japan. So it's wonderful to be able to bring this art form as is, just translating the language, but it's really direct translation, and it works.
Well, give an idea what people are going to see on NHK in a special starting next month and then going through the fall.
Right, so Rakugo storytelling started in the Edo period in Japan. And there's this other art form called ukiyo-e, and they're woodblock prints, which were also popular in the same period. And these prints are actually more famous than Rakugo in the West. The Impressionist painters, such as Van Gogh, were in love with these prints and copied some of them as well and learned from them. So I'm introducing each of these prints, these woodblock prints, had a kind of story to tell. They were kind of like comics. You only have one picture, but it's kind of like comics. Like you look at something and the people in the out here would have laughed, or they would have understood different implications and all that. So I'm bringing out the stories of the woodblock prints in a Rakugo storytelling style, which entails a little bit of light humor added to some interesting background explanation of these wonderful prints.
And it's starting on NHK in June, right?
Exactly, yes.
How long does it take for a person uninitiated in this to get it? If they've never seen a Rakugo, how long until they say, I get it, and you get them?
Yeah. If they come to see my show, I'd say about 2 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about Rakugo is you have two halves to there's two parts to the performance, and I told you about the second half, which is the storytelling proper. But the first half is just like stand-up comedy, and you can explain the art form. So a lot of people, even in Japan, they're coming to see Rakugo for the first time. So the storytellers say, oh, well, I move my head to the left, I'm playing one character. I move my head to the right, I play another character, and you make a few jokes. Everybody will get it almost immediately.
That's interesting. And again here, this is going to be starting on NHK World this June here, and it's going to be running through for a few months after. That's fascinating. You've just had Japan Day, which I understand was a huge success, and I certainly appreciate a few minutes with you.
Thank you very
so
much.
much. Absolutely.
My pleasure.
And that's going to do it for us tonight here. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. as always. Till then.